I came across this post on Niri subreddit recently where somebody watched one of my videos around Niri, probably the one around how is Niri this good, but technically they watched half the video, but they have a really good point here, which is like, what kind of workflows do you most prefer scrolling for? And in that video I made here around Niri, I showed off some of its features, but I didn't really go over any practical use cases of how I'm using Niri to solve specific problems. So they went over a couple of different use cases they have here, how they're using Hyperland to solve that, and they're kind of just curious to learn a little bit more about Niri. So in this video, we're going to do two things. So one, I wrote out this blog post. Right now it's on localhost. By the time you watch it, it'll be on my main site. I'll leave a link to that one in the description. But yeah, I think there's a couple of things I want to just go over in this post first. And then after that, we're going to go and live demo a whole bunch of different practical use cases and how I'm using Niri to solve them. And really, I don't think what I'm doing is that unique here. You're probably going to have very similar situations on your end as well, because we have all these similar wants, right? It really doesn't matter if you're using Linux or Windows or Mac OS. And there's kind of just high level objectives that you typically want to apply to any environment, which is, yeah, you want to be able to open and close apps, find what's open, and switch to them quickly. Also, maybe you want to arrange windows in ways that make you feel productive, and whenever possible, make this feel as seamless as possible and have it just work, right? It should basically just be in the background. You don't even notice these things happening. Also, you want things to be adaptable and flexible with how you run and use applications, and also make it really easy to do one-off things that break the rules of what you normally do. For example, maybe you want to make this one window floated instead of being tiled, or vice versa. Maybe you want to center a couple of different windows together or modify the size of the window just so it fits perfectly well into whatever you're working on right now. Also, maybe you want to put this window over in a specific position, but only if this other application is open. And I'm sure that list can really be expanded on, but really, all of it boils down to, let me do the thing I want to do in the easiest and most predictable way possible. And if it can't be done quickly in an ad hoc way, then make it easy to script so that you, as the end user, when you run that script or do whatever you need to do, it becomes easy to use. And I really do think there is this idea of operational burden that just drains your energy, right? That's why learning something like Vim initially can feel really tough, because instead of just editing or solving whatever problem that you're doing, whether it's writing or coding or whatever, your brain is also occupied by trying to remember 100 Vim specific things at the same time. The same can really be said about using any non-trivial tool like a video editor or using Excel really well. And eventually though, when things become muscle memory, you don't have to actively think about it, and you're moving at the speed of thought, which is really a wonderful feeling. Kind of feels like magic, and maybe you've experienced that before. And the same thing applies to using your operating system too, right? Or more specifically, arranging and accessing windows. You can feel like a little drag, pun intended there, if you're constantly dragging things around to position them, instead of focusing on what you want to do, which is really just like use the application that you're trying to use. You know how it is, right? It's like, maybe you just drag the thing over here. It's not quite aligned, but it's good enough. Or you want this window always on top of another one, but only sometimes. Or you've opened another app after you've had a whole bunch of different things open, but you don't want it full screen, but you also don't want to be distracted by the other visible apps that you just had open. So manually, maybe you minimize them all, but then at the same time, it's like when you're done doing that other thing, it's like you want to go back and get into the zone of the other apps. And it becomes really tedious if you have to just keep manipulating all of your windows like this. And there are different ways to solve the above problems with basically any window compositor, but the takeaway is the more you need to think and perform manual actions to solve them, the more annoying and tedious it is. Now, to be fair, you also have to think like, is this really the bottleneck or like the main problem? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I just know from 2.5 decades of using computers, you may not realize it's a problem until you've experienced what not having the problem feels like. It's sort of like chronic pain, right? You might be used to it, but once it's gone, you're like, how the hell did I ever live with this before? And yeah, let's go over maybe some components or things or tools that you can use to make arranging and accessing windows a little bit smoother. And then you have this idea of tiling, floating, scrolling, and workspaces. So tiling is being able to see multiple windows at once without them overlapping. Typically they get sized to fit your desktop or a region of your desktop. Then there's floating, which is placing your windows anywhere, even on top of other windows. This could be fully or partially. It's really up to you. Can even be halfway off the screen if you'd like. Then you have scrolling, which is treating your desktop as an infinite horizontal plane, which can be broken up into columns so you can cycle between windows. Then we have workspaces. They provide additional desktops that have their own windows that you can then switch between. It's kind of interesting at how relatable the above maps to real life concepts too. Like for example, you can imagine each window as a piece of paper and a physical desk as your desktop, right? And then you can arrange these pieces of paper next to each other like tiling, or you can stack them like floating. A new workspace is kind of like having a separate desk, whereas scrolling lets you have a really huge desk that you get to control what part of the desk is currently in view. I like to think of that one sort of like you can imagine being in a really big library, librarians up on that ladder, just like shooting across different bookshelves there to get where they want. Scrolling is sort of like that. Now, all 4 of these tools can be combined together if your window compositor supports it. So then it's like, well, okay, if I'm going to be choosing a window compositor, it's like niri, Hyperland, something else. Maybe neither of them, just like roll with KDE Plasma instead, a whole desktop environment. So a decision point for you to think about when choosing a window compositor or whatever environment that you want, yeah, what 4 tools listed above do you value most? If you want everything to tile by default and your desktop shrinks for each app you have open, then maybe Hyperland is what you want. If you want a really huge scrolling desktop where you get the control when windows are tiled, then niri is a great fit. If neither one of those sounds great, then maybe just roll with KDE Plasma, which will float everything by default, but it gives you all sorts of different options and tools to tile things on demand. It's a really excellent fit if you don't want to muck around with building up your whole desktop environment from the ground up. You'll have a completely reasonable and fully working environment that's highly customizable too. Now, with that said, if you do like the idea of customizing your own desktop environment, starting with picking a compositor and then all sorts of other things that go with it, then yeah, you might want to choose between something like niri, Hyperland, or something else. But yeah, I tried all sorts of different environments over the years, including like Windows OS, blah, blah, blah. I've landed on niri, right? It fits my style and it's quite adaptable. It's also stable and efficient. And beyond its technical features, there's other things I like too, such as the author is really helpful. And yeah, just going back to earlier in the post, how I mentioned things like being flexible, adaptable, being able to perform one-off tasks for whatever ad hoc workflows you might have, niri really does have a really nice fit here. I can't cover everything it does, but here's a couple of different examples and tips, right? These are things you might want to configure if you have custom workflows you want to do where the default operation of just opening a window doesn't do exactly what you want. For example, you can resize and position floating windows with niri. For example, maybe you want to have an 800 by 600 size window and then position it to the XY coordinates of 400 on your desktop. So with niri, you can just do niri message action, and then you can set the width, set the height, and then set the position of where you want it on your desktop there. You can roll this up into a script, instead of running 3 commands or whatever, to resize and position the currently selected window, like an idea of a specific window that you get. It's really up to you here. You can also create key bindings out of that script if you'd like, however you see fit. In the past on Windows, I've used tools like Sizer to do the above here. I've done videos about that if you want to check it out if you're using Windows. But yeah, in this case, now it's kind of built into the compositor. If I just want to, resize or position something, I have these tools at my disposal, which is really nice. Now, if you have a specific app that you always want to be opened in a certain way by default, then you have this idea of window rules that you can apply. And it's a really good segue into the next topic here, which is, making specific windows act and look differently or specific applications. Now, yeah, when it comes to window rules, there's all sorts of different things in niri's documentation here where, the idea is you can match on something like a specific title or an app ID in different states as well. And if one of these are true, then yeah, all these things are at your disposal here. Maybe you want to make that window's opacity less, or maybe you want to have a different focus ring, or maybe you want that window to be floated or, full screen or whatever it happens to be. You have all that stuff right there ready to go for you to start customizing. We'll look at some examples, I would imagine, along the way here once we get to the live demo part. And then lastly here, for niri being very scriptable, there is this in the documentation as well. Yeah, you can communicate with a niri instance over an IPC socket. What that really means is, you can run commands like what we see here and just programmatically start manipulating windows and applications at your discretion. There's also event streams that you can monitor to react to certain things happening. It's a really powerful system here to let you start creating custom workflows, right? All in all, it lets you create workflows for whatever you're doing. Now, with that said, yeah, let's go over some practical examples of using niri in my day-to-day. One use case I have a lot is I'll just open up a browser, and right now it's going to use the default actions here, which is just taking up half the screen on the left. But typically I kind of like making it a little bit wider, and I like to make it centered. So I'm just hitting 2 different hotkeys to do that. For example, if we go here and take a look, by the way, I'll mention here too, my monitor is 4K. I'm recording at 4K right now. That's why the font size is super small. I think it's important to see the actual size that I'm working with things so you can see how it really is. But yeah, once it comes down to reading text, I'll zoom in a sec. But yeah, if I go and take a look here at the niri config for this, then let's also zoom in a little bit. Normally I wouldn't have to be doing this stuff manually because I have it preset up, but now we're going just native sizes of stuff. We have mod C, which is going to center something. And then also there is mod R here, which is going to just cycle the widths of what something could be. For example, right now, this is taking up half the screen, but I could choose to make it 2/3 or 1/3, and now it's half. And now, it's half, but, we click into this one and it's 2/3, and that's bigger than like an entire desktop. So that's why it's scrolling a little bit to fit both of these things at the same time. If I were to make this back to be half width, then it's like, yeah, we could see here that, as I switch between these, nothing is shifting around. But yeah, okay, so there's that. I'm actually going to keep this off to the second monitor here just to have my terminal there ready to go, so I can just drag it back in here and we can play with that. But we're not looking at that right now. Now, that said, you might be thinking real quick, like, okay, if you're going to open up a browser and then like make this a little bit wider and centered, like you could with niri just like configure the window rules, so this is always the case here. But I don't like to have this happen all the time, because sometimes if this is closed, sometimes I just want to open up a browser like this and then open up something to the right of it, whether that's a terminal or maybe it's Thunar or maybe it's something else. I actually do want the side-by-side view here. So it doesn't really kill me to hit R, like mod R, and then mod C again to just have this to be set up here. Now, there is one use case that I do like to do quite a bit here, which is writing a blog post. So with that said, let me open up a browser again, just like we saw before. I'll open up a terminal here. And then I guess we can go to a tmux session where I do have the blog post here. Then with the blog post loaded over here, I'm zoomed in a lot. So let me actually zoom out to the normal zoom levels that it would be. Typically, I really like this idea of being able to just write on the right-hand side like this. Like in my mind, this is middle. Like I'm looking at the camera right now. Where the cursor is very close to the center. So my eyes are kind of just like super comfortable, just looking basically straight ahead. I'm in the middle of a 32-inch monitor. And then over here, we have the left-hand side. You can see that, I can just remove this and then save it, and we could see the live preview in action here. But there's a lot of white space here, because it is a wide monitor. So normally what I would do is actually I would make this 1/3 and then also make this one 1/3. Then I would hit another keybind, which we'll go over in a sec, which is going to center both of these windows at the same time. So now I have this really nice view where it's like, I'm writing here, super focused, looking basically center, and then just a little bit to the left, I can see the real-time previews of all that. So let me just go and bring this terminal over here and take a look at that. We'll make it full screen again, just so it's a little bit easy to work with here. But yeah, in this case here, instead of doing mod C, I'm doing mod control C, which is going to center all visible columns here with this command here. And then, I can make this not full screen if I want, bring this back over to the second monitor or whatever, and then boom, we're back in action here. And I think I just demonstrated one thing that I really like about niri just from playing around here. Because if you look at this, it's like we brought a whole different window into this environment, that other code editor before with the zoomed in font. And now that it's like not on screen anymore, this just went back to normal. Like I didn't have to manipulate these windows to bring them back on how they were. I didn't have to like worry about going to different workspaces and all that. It's all just right here, which is pretty nice. Now, another use case I do around blogging in general is sometimes I'll actually have another monitor open like this to the right, also make this one 1/3. And now we actually have 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. So there's no scrolling that needs to happen here because they all fit. So here, use case wise would be like, I might be writing in the middle over here, but then on the right-hand side, I'm doing some research. Maybe I'm looking up a command or a definition or some documentation or whatever it happens to be, while I can do like right, look up docs, right, look up docs. And then over here, I can still see the real-time preview of what's happening. Of course, you could always make this a second tab in this browser on the left, but then it's like, I kind of need to switch between the tab and then, seeing the preview, because sometimes I'm like kind of doing 3 things at once. I'm writing a post, looking it up, and wanting to see this at the same time. This is a really great use case for just using tiled windows, right? Being able to see all 3 at once. So yeah, there's that. So that's really all there is for me for blogging, basically. And when I'm writing a blog post, that's pretty interesting. Again, maybe you're not writing a blog post, but that's a use case that you can start using here. Another thing that you might want to do is, just this idea, right, of maybe you have a half screen window and a half screen window, and then you're just like, filtering between or jumping between both of these at your discretion, doing whatever you're doing. Maybe it's a browser and a code editor here. In this case here, I guess I could, let's say, go to, I don't know, the dot files here. There's a lot of nonsense on the screen here. But yeah, let me do this and actually zoom in using tmux to get rid of those other panes so it's less of a distraction. But let's say that I'm in my dot files playing around here, coding something. It doesn't need to be dot files, obviously, like whatever you're coding. And you're just like looking at some documentation on the left. Or maybe if you prefer, you can just like swap these windows around. Like I'm hitting a hotkey to just move these windows to whatever makes sense for what I want to do. That's pretty nice here. This is a 4K monitor. So again, I could make this like this, and now I have like 3 different split windows, and this little vertical line here, these are 80 characters. So even with things split in half, I can actually fit 3 80 character things side by side and have some research here on the right. If I wanted to open up like Thunar in this case here, because maybe I want to have, I don't know, some file graphical browser open at the same time, I can just bring this in over here, and then, I could start doing all sorts of different things like this. This is a workflow I do have every once in a while. Usually I wouldn't have something like Thunar open, but I would have like a, a browser looking up documentation while I'm coding. But there's also a lot of times where it's like, I'm actually like fully coding, and then I have like maybe 6 windows open, in this case here, like it could be whatever project I'm working on. But in this case here, it's like if I want to view 6 of them, I can't really look at the browser at the same time. But I can just like peek over to the browser, do something, and then kind of just go back to here. And I'm just hitting hotkeys to scroll with niri naturally, not doing anything special here. Literally mod right arrow, mod left arrow. And I also have them double bound to Vim hotkeys as well. If I bring this back over here, we could take a look here, moving around. Yeah, you can see here, there's the mod keys for left and then right, and then also with Vim bindings as well. If you just want to like, actually, yeah, I should mention here too, when I flip these around before using control, I just hit control here and it's the same set of binds, just holding control to actually move them. Otherwise you can just focus them, hitting mod left and right, etc., which is pretty cool. So let me bring that back over here and then we're back in business how we were before. And again, if you want to have it the other way around where like, you need to peek this way, you can do that. Also, maybe you want to make this a little bit smaller so you have more visible space here for this. Yeah, you can do all sorts of different things. So there's that. Let me start closing some of these because a lot of text on screen, but that's another thing. Okay, cool. So like use case number 2, coding and then having a browser open, or again, doesn't need to be a browser. It can be whatever you want. Another use case that comes up a lot is wanting to have something full screen, but then floating some windows on top of it. For example, if I go and open up KDE Live, and then I want to make it full screen just for now. This is a video editing tool, but if I want to open up, I don't know, let's say Thunar here, I open that up in floating, by the way. Now I can kind of just go to, I don't know, let's say media and then YouTube, and then maybe this one here. I'll just open up this project. So actually, I'll just open it up like this instead. We'll close out this KDE Live and we'll keep this other KDE Live opened up. Cool. All right, make this one full screen as well. So this is my normal setup here for doing some video editing, where I've got a 1080p video, which is what we're going to see the preview of here. And then, some of my clips here and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to really do any video editing, but where I'm going with this one is oftentimes what I really like to do is I will create these timestamps, right? These chapters on YouTube that you've probably seen a lot. So what I'll do here is I'll actually float a terminal on top of here, resize it a little bit so it fits in this little gray area. And then here, it's like I can just go into, let's go to my blog here. And then there's a blog post here. I could start filling in these timestamps. Maybe I'll make this a little bit taller too. Again, I could totally script this with Niri to just have this always open up in this exact spot if I want. Who knows? Maybe I'll do that at some point. But right now it takes like 10 seconds to do and I'm not super annoyed by it. But here's a really cool thing. I've got a full screen application here, where I should say a maximized application because Waybar is still visible with a little bit of gaps as well. But here it's like I could start working around in this video, doing my cuts, blah, 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 and be like, okay, this is AIA, like the next timestamp that I want is going to be at like 1 minute and whatever. It doesn't really matter. I'm just putting in nonsense for now. But you can see it's like I could do cut, boom, right, my timestamps here and just keep jumping around here. I do have 2 monitors. I can totally put this on the second monitor instead, but it's a little bit sweeter just having it right here. So yeah, that's a use case I do a ton. And this is not limited to video editing, of course, right? You can have any application, doesn't even need to be full screen, and you can just start floating windows, right? If I want to open up another floating Thunar on top of here, I can, again, interact here with the video editing and just also jump here to Thunar. I can drag some stuff into clips here if I had other videos I wanted to do. These are things I do a lot. And yeah, so there's that. So let me detach from Tmux here. Get rid of this one. We'll close down here as well. We just took a look at using KDE Live in full screen, but also I use GIMP a lot too to do some image editing. That's a very similar type of thing where I typically want GIMP to be full screen, and then I'll do my image editing because normally I'd have like a 1080p size image here for a thumbnail or whatever. But I could still at the same time want a browser open to the right or something like that, right? So we can have a browser open. I could typically have a terminal open. And again, we're going into use cases that typically do happen a lot. I'll also have Thunar open as well, because here's a use case. I'm writing a blog post, I'm about to release a YouTube video or whatever. I typically have the blog post open here, right? And then I'll also be like inside of, let's say, the YouTube folder for the actual one. In this case, here's a pre-made video from the other week where it's like, I've got the thumbnail, I've got the KDE Live file, I've got my clips or whatever, screenshots that need to be in there. That's all there off to the right. And then it's like, okay, I'm editing my thumbnail. I've got it, I can go and export that to that directory. And then it's like, I've got little scripts set up for just creating the actual thumbnail size that I want for the blog post as well. So that's all scripted or whatever. That's not really important or related to Niri in this case here. But this idea of like, well, normally it's like, all right, I'll be editing the video. And actually in this case, I'd probably have these switched because what I typically would end up doing is, yeah, I'd be editing the thumbnail like this and going to Thunar. I'm also going to move this one over a little bit as well, because yeah, realistically it's, making the thumbnail here in GIMP. And then it's like, it's going to arrive in this folder here. And then it's like, well, then I have my code editor where I can modify my blog post and now reference that. And then also it's like, I can upload the video to YouTube here. So it's like, I'm scrolling between these things here and I'm not really getting lost. There's not that many windows open. I really don't use workspaces a whole lot there because I don't know if a workspace would really help me, because it's like, I just want to jump between a couple of different things like this. It's so fast to jump between them. It doesn't matter. And really, I've been just cycling through these, but there's different ways to do this as well. Like for example, I can hit mod W, which is now going to use Walker, which is now going to show me all the open windows or applications that I have on my system. And then I can fuzzy find the one that I want to actually jump to. It's like right now, OBS is actually running on the second monitor that you can't see. But if I want to just jump over quickly to that one Thunar, I can do that, and boom, it's going to be in view. If I want to jump back over to GIMP, I can do that. If I want to jump back over to Firefox, I can just do this and have it jumped automatically there. And what's really, really cool about that one is, let's say that Firefox is now on a different workspace, which by the way, I just set it over to workspace 2. I can jump between these different workspaces. Let me go back to this. I can now jump back down to here, whatever. If I do this hotkey again, this is going to still pick that up on the second workspace. So I can go here and now it's going to scroll me right to it. So it's very, very easy not to get lost or, think like, oh man, I have all these applications open. I have no idea how to get to them. Fuzzy matching to find the actual window here is so fast and it's so easy to do that. And yeah, it is really, really nice. Now that feature is available with Walker, but maybe you're not using Walker and you want to do the same thing. So it wouldn't be that crazy to build something like that. I actually have no plan for this one, so I don't know how far we're going to get, but it's like we could use Niri's IPC, like communications with Niri, to get this information out. For example, if we do Niri message and then we do Windows, that is going to get all the different windows that we have open here, right? Again, going back to here, you could see these are window titles. And then also we have this idea of like the IDs as well. But in this case here, let's use JSON instead. I'm going to make it full screen. Let's go with JSON, cool, and then we'll make it more readable with JQ. But here we could see, yeah, each of these windows has a title and it also has an ID. So you can imagine writing a shell script. Right now I'm just screwing around on the command line like this, but it's like you could use a shell script, whatever, to extract out all the different titles, and then you could put them in whatever menu system that you're using. You can even throw it into FCF if you want. And then you just need to have the IDs associated with those windows. And then you could do something like Niri message action, and then I think we can get help on this one, sure. And then we could take a look here for focus related things. So that I'm pretty sure there's a focus window in here somewhere. So if we do, actually let me put tmux in there so it's a little bit easier. Niri message action help, and then we do a search for, what are we searching for? We are searching for focus window, right? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different ones. So there is a focus window just in itself. So let me see if I can find it somewhere. Yeah, there it is. So like focus a window by ID. So you then, yeah, you could just focus the window by its ID, and then boom, you've just selected or focused that window. So like when I'm doing this with Walker and I select one of these, it is just focusing that window and then that's putting it into view automatically. So like Niri is doing the heavy lifting of making sure you're getting, warped over to that window and then it's being focused. But yeah, that's like something you could do in a shell script, honestly, probably in like 15 minutes or something like that if you just had the menu system set up however you want there. So yeah, it's not limited to Walker at all. You can totally build that on your own. So there's that. Of course, that's not the only way to focus windows. Niri itself comes with an overview. You can hit Mod O in my case here. That's going to open that up. But yeah, now you have different workspaces that you can just cycle between. If I wanted to click into the GIMP up here, it would just pop into it just like this. I can go back to the overview. If I wanted to put GIMP on the other workspace below here, I can just take it and just drag it down here. And now it's going to be even tiled with this terminal over here. So it's like this overview gives you also a very easy way to see what's open on your system here. So you never get lost just wondering like, hey, do I have like 8,000 different applications over? So yeah, with that said, that's a couple of different use cases here that I'm using Niri for. There's not really a whole lot of other ones that I would probably include in this video. I mean, like, there's just like using your computer generally, right? It's just like you might have a couple of different things open. You've got this open, you're kind of filtering between things. You maybe got your terminal open. Maybe you want to have this thing just like where now the terminal is tiled. In that other Niri video I made, I went over more use cases like that. But it's like, this idea of like having something tiled like this with something to the right. I do this from time to time. It's quite handy, especially if I'm dragging things from like this pane to this pane or doing something here with some research. It's nice to have that ability here. And really, Niri doesn't get in my way for any of that, which is what I really, really like about this setup in general. I am now, I've been using it for probably 6 weeks, and it's like I've gotten to the point where it certainly without a doubt feels better than my old Windows setup in terms of just like not dealing with the minutia of moving things around, but also, yeah, I really like not having it dynamically tiled where I don't want a shrinking setup here where every time I open an application, it's going to get smaller and then really leverage hard on workspaces. I just find it so natural just to, yeah, scroll between things to get to where I want. And then also being able to quickly fuzzy find stuff like this, like going right back to, the other one down here, super easy, super nice. It's quite enjoyable to use in my day-to-day. I guess one thing I'll show here, let me close out GIMP here just so we have more full screen of the terminal here, going back to some of those window rules. So if we go and take a look here at the dot files and then Then we could just open up the niri config here. Cool, there it is. And yeah, here's some of the window rules here. Again, I went over kind of some of these rules in that previous video around how is niri this good. But yeah, in this case here, you can see an example of I've got one match rule with a couple of different rules here. If either one of these matches, like an OR condition, then they're all going to be floated. So things like MPV to looking at images and videos, not GIMP itself, but the preferences for GIMP, they will be floated by default, etc. And then, yeah, you can see here for the floating terminal and file manager with Thunar, I have them floating as well, and they're opening up at specific sizes, blah, 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 blah. You know, that other video went into more details here, but it's a great example of just like, hey, you know what? You can mold your environment using Niri's configuration here to have this happen by default for certain applications. And again, we saw examples or kind of talked about them before where, you know, when I had something like KDE Live open, if I really wanted to have that terminal for my blog just like put into a certain position there, I could totally do that just by using some little shell script, write some rules to be like, hey, by the way, make this floating window this width, this height, and put it at this position, and then boom, it's going to be there. So I don't have to do it by hand every time. I can assign that to a hotkey, maybe something on my keypad or something. It just hasn't been an annoyance enough yet to do that. But it's there at my disposal, which I think is really cool. Yeah, you know, I didn't really cover this super hard in the other video, but like if you're someone who really likes having named workspaces, like, hey, by the way, I always want all of my chat apps on, you know, the chat workspace or something. Niri supports that as well. It's in their documentation if you want to go and check it out. You don't have to use dynamic ones that I'm doing here. So if you like that workflow, then yeah, more power to you. Niri makes that available to do, where you can just assign like, hey, Firefox is always going to be on workspace like browser or whatever. I just find in practice that I use my computer much more dynamically in the sense that like I might be working on something, but then I want a browser open whatever I'm working on. It's like, I don't just want the browser always to be in a certain workspace. Likewise with code editors and file managers and terminals or whatever, that's all the same thing. Oftentimes I'm doing all these things together where I just want to like open up something very quickly to, I don't know, run a command in a floating terminal and just remove it or something like that. I don't like just having them on a dedicated workspace. But yeah, again, you know, this is not right or wrong. This is my personal preference. But I do feel that Niri gives you a lot of tools to be able to set up these workflows however you see fit. So with that said, I'm sure I'm going to think tonight of like 10 other use cases that didn't cover in this video here, but I think that covers a lot of the general ones where it's like, yeah, you got things open full screen, not full screen, tiled, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You know, you got to see some practical examples as well. Yep, there's going to be way more videos in the future around my whole setup, but hopefully this gets you going here on just seeing some use cases of using Niri in practice. With that said, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer all of them. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Really does help a lot. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.